Good morning, welcome to the Alberta Craft Gallery in Calgary. Today we're going to talk to spotlight artist Deanne Underwood about her fabulous felted landscapes. I'm Jill Nuckles and the spotlight is here in Calgary at our gallery in C-Space King Edward. It will be up till the end of May 2023. So if you're in that time period, come see it in person. Otherwise, enjoy the work here. Good morning, Deanne. How are you?
I'm great, thank you. How are you?
Good. The first thing we should talk about is we're in Calgary, but you're actually from Edmonton.
Yes.
So have you been living in Edmonton a long time? Is that your hometown?
Yes, I would say so. I've lived in Edmonton for 20 years, which is longer than I've ever lived anywhere. My family was a military family while I was growing up. So we bounced around between Manitoba and Saskatchewan. I was actually born on the East Coast, and then as a ballet dancer I lived in Toronto and Vancouver. But my husband and I settled here. He's an engineer and works in oil and gas, in Edmonton. And so yeah, I call Edmonton home now for sure.
I'm originally from just north of Edmonton, and I can see where the big skies come from, because that was my childhood with the big prairie skies.
Mm-hmm.
So you mentioned being a ballet dancer. So did that come before making the felting pieces?
Oh yes, so I trained as a classical ballet dancer from childhood and took it quite seriously pretty early. I only actually danced professionally for 4 years, full time. My body has some facility issues, some movement issues, so I moved out of dance as a full-time profession in my 20s and became a massage therapist. And I did massage therapy for 18 years. I had lots of great opportunities to work with dancers, with the Alberta Ballet in fact, and with sports teams in Rugby Canada and all kinds of different athletes. So that was a very fulfilling career for almost 20 years. And in my last 2 years of working as a massage therapist, I started to play with felt when I had time off. And it quickly became a pretty prominent interest in my life. And I was forced off work, unfortunately, 2 years ago due to chronic injury that wasn't going to be able to be fixed. So my husband actually suggested that I lean into the felt making and see where I could go with it, and here we are.
So it's a bit of an interesting transition from something very physical to something that is sort of more small and intimate. So other than the need to do that, what was it about wool and the landscapes that drew you in? Like, did you start with a class, or where did that come from?
No, I've never taken a class, but while I was growing up, I fell in love with the art of Myrna Harris. She was a Saskatchewan-based landscape felt artist, and she had her own flock of sheep, from what I understand, and she would dye her own wool, and she made these just incredible Saskatchewan prairie landscapes with wool and then often other textiles stitched together in kind of a collage. And my family, my parents own a piece and my aunt owns a piece, and I'm just enthralled by them. She unfortunately passed away before I could grow up and purchase a piece myself, but it was always something that I was so attached to the idea of having a felt piece in my home that when I found myself with some time, I decided to try to make my own. And in fact, the third piece that I made is still hanging in our home. So that's how I fell in love with felt art.
So all landscape, your work, you just, look, that's the thing?
For the most part. I've been commissioned to do a couple of other projects. I created a dancer for a physiotherapist friend of mine. Trying to think if there's any other, not a lot of other opportunities. I'm pretty satisfied with landscapes so far. So.
Well, there is lots of landscapes, especially in Alberta, where we have from the tallest to the flattest. So, Melanie, if you want to move in and have a close-up of some of these pieces as we go through them. So I sort of grouped the prairies on one side here, which is a landscape that I love. And what draws you in? Like, what is it about the prairies that makes you want to recreate them in wool?
I always start with the sky. That is my favorite part. I spend part of every day just observing the sky. So that's where I begin, and I work my way down. And I just love the groundedness of the prairie landscape and the textural quality of it, and the constant movement. It might seem boring to some people, but I've never believed that for myself. So prairie also just feels like home to me. That's, where I spent my formative years, and I associate prairie with family. And so I find it very, very comforting and quite emotionally charged.
So you're using a combination of wet felting and needle felting. So for some of our listeners out there, what is the difference?
So wet felting is the process of laying down fiber and then soaking it with hot soapy water and then agitating it in different ways. And this can produce a really nice blurred effect. Most of my work is actually needle felting at this point. Once I fell into needle felting, I kind of stuck with that because you can really control every aspect of the composition with a felting needle. So needle felting, you use a single needle or multiple needles in one tool to tangle the fibers together. The needles are barbed, and so they encourage the fiber to attach to the other fiber, and you can just really create really finite detail with needle felting. I finish each of my pieces with a gentle wet felting process that's called fulling. So I don't do any of the rubbing agitation that a lot of other felt artists do. I simply wet the piece down with hot soapy water and then roll it, usually around a pool noodle, and just pressure is introduced in each direction, and this just smooths the piece out and gets rid of the needle marks for the most part, and it kind of seals it and shrinks it just a tiny bit, and it produces an effect I really like that to me feels very refined. My work is not very fluffy, it's quite smooth and sleek.
And what kind of ground or backing are you felting onto? Is it just the wool, or do you have a back?
Well, I do different things for different pieces. For sure for the mountain scenes, because they involve introducing so much fiber into each piece, I start with reclaimed wool blankets as my base because they're nice and sturdy, but they're also made of wool, so they'll grab onto the wool that I'm introducing into each composition. And they don't distort and warp as much as a daintier fabric would. You can create your own base using wool, but that's very labor intensive. So yeah, for the most part these days I'm using reclaimed wool blankets.
Well, and on these mountain pieces, you're getting an incredible amount of detail because you can actually recognize some of these mountains from the actual places. So are you starting from a photograph, or are you doing it in the wild?
So my friends and I spend a lot of time in the mountains. My husband especially is an outdoorsman. So I ask people for photographs, or I see photographs that they have, or I use photographs that I've taken when we're on our own travels. Every once in a while I'll approach someone if I see a photograph and ask if I can reference it. I'm never copying entirely. I go my own way with the color and the season, and certainly the sky. The sky tends to be whatever I feel like doing. So yes, I don't have an eidetic memory. I do use photographs for reference for my mountain pieces. For my prairie, it's all just from my own imagination.
Well, and I think everyone can picture where you're standing taking this photograph.
Yes,
every Albertan anyway.
The iconic Lake Louise.
Yeah, and the color of the lake, the whole thing is quite beautiful. What kind of wool do you use?
I use merino and Corriedale for the most part. I'm starting to play with other fibers like alpaca and things like that, but for the most part, merino and Corriedale, and I source as much Canadian wool as I can.
And do you have someone you buy it from? Do you have someone you would like to give a shout out to? So
Legacy Studio in Cochrane is a wonderful place to buy fiber. I buy most of my fiber from Joe's Yarn Shop. Joe's, is that what it's called? In Stony Plain, so just outside of Edmonton. She carries my favorite product, which is Fleece Artist Merino from Nova Scotia. I just love the colors that they have. And Little Blue Fiber Studio in Edmonton is also an excellent place to get tools, and she carries an incredible array of single color roving and some other Canadian brands of wool. People are doing some really interesting things in Alberta with dyeing, and it's really fun to be a part of.
And are you interested in that next sort of process, another level of materials of dyeing?
Yes, I would love to learn how to dye because it can be difficult to find enough of the colors that I need. The shops tend to purchase a wide array of color, but I tend to be looking mostly for greens and blues, to be honest. So once I've bought all of their greens and blues, I have to just wait for the next purchase cycle. So I would love to dye my own fiber.
Well, thank you, Deanne. That's been so interesting to talk to you and learn more about your pieces. I'm assuming you're a new member to the Craft Council, and your work is just you're starting to apply for more exhibitions and things. So this will be here for 2 months, and other than that, we will keep looking for your stuff in our galleries. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Jill.